Let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen and White House correspondent Monica Alba. Good morning to both of you. Monica, we just heard at the end of that piece about how VP Harris is focused on the next 14 days. But does that mean that behind the scenes there's no planning going on for all the different kinds of scenarios that pop up after the election? What's being put into place?
They definitely are preparing, Christine, for the various different scenarios, and we know that according to several sources who are familiar with the Harris campaign strategy. They're bracing for the possibility of really several things. The fact that it could take days to declare a winner, the fact that it is possible former President Trump could do what he did 4 years ago, which is come out and declare victory before everything is tallied. And, of course, Harris herself is a trained attorney. This is somebody who's very familiar with legal challenges and the courts overall. So she has directed her team of lawyers to be prepared and to really, again, be kind of bracing for this idea that we came to know a few years ago of not just an election night, but an election week possibly. Now, again, it could change and things could be known far sooner, within hours potentially, and not days. But just on the off chance that that happens, and the likelihood given what we saw 4 years ago, they're certainly ready for that. But as you saw there, the vice president, publicly at least on the campaign trail, isn't really going to be talking about those different scenarios, I'm told. Instead, she is going to focus on this get out the vote final push before that. But once that comes, they say they will be ready.
You know, John, speaking to the New York Times, former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly said he believes that if elected, Donald Trump would rule like a dictator. The Times writing, quote, Kelly said Trump met the definition of a fascist. Let's listen to some of that.
If he was left to his own devices, would he be a dictator if he didn't have people around him?
Oh, I think he'd love to be. I think he'd love to be just like he was in business. He could tell people to do things and they would do it, and not really bother too much about whether what the legalities were and whatnot. But again, I didn't know him before, so I can't really.
At the same time, The Atlantic published a news story citing two sources who claim Trump once said in private conversation, quote, I need the kind of generals that Hitler had. Trump's spokesperson pushing back on all of this, saying that he never made those Hitler comments, and adding, quote, John Kelly has totally beclowned himself with these debunked stories. John, this isn't a new characterization of Trump, so does this do any damage with less than 2 weeks to go?
You're right. It's not a new characterization of Trump, and actually that particular quote, not that it shouldn't have the same resonance years later, was actually in a book by Peter Baker and Susan Glasser that came out a couple of years ago about Trump. But the underlying question of whether it changes any votes, I think the answer is no. There's no new information, at least there has not been new information in this election that seems to have dented Donald Trump's level of popularity with his supporters. As he once said famously in the 2016 campaign, he felt like he could walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot people and not lose any votes. I think that there's some truth to that. And so the question now is whether Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, is going to be able to get to a point where she has the trust of more voters than he does.
Monica, the candidates are trying to pick off any last disaffected voters that they can find. I'm thinking about those people who refused to vote for President Biden during the primaries over his support for Israel. In her interview with Hallie, Kamala Harris shied away from really differentiating herself from the current administration. Why not take that opportunity?
Yeah, and she's had several of those opportunities over the last couple of weeks. Certainly, she has debuted that newer line about how she promises her hypothetical administration wouldn't be a continuation of the Biden presidency. But we know that his record is a drag on her candidacy. So there is this awareness and push for her to differentiate. She did try there to lean in on some of those maybe economic proposals that we could hear a little bit more about in this closing stretch, and about acknowledging that inflation is still for some people, in terms of the cost of living, it feels too high at the grocery store or at the gas pump, and this idea of trying to put forward proposals on affordable housing. So she's trying to say that there are things that their own Biden-Harris administration maybe did to get the economy to where it is, in a place where it certainly has recovered compared to 4 years ago, but that she would want to do more. Again, this is somebody, though, who has been so unflinchingly loyal to the president that she doesn't want to really go beyond that. that, according to my reporting. So she needs to kind of walk that fine line. And that's what we keep seeing her do. And it'll be notable if she takes it any further. Christine.
Hey, John, the voting is underway. It's 2 weeks to the election, but people are voting now. And when you look at the numbers of early votes being cast, more than 21 million in just a few days, according to TargetSmart, how do you think both sides, John, are feeling about these early numbers?
After the election, Christine, we'll all look back and say, wow, we saw the deeds of what was going on in this early voting. But it's actually very difficult to tell, to project. I've been talking, of course, to a lot of Republican sources because I'm covering the Trump campaign. They do feel good that they're banking some of these votes as it were, particularly in Nevada. They've looked at the numbers there. They feel good about that. They feel good about where they are in Georgia and Pennsylvania. There is some debate as to whether people who vote very early in the process are simply people who would have otherwise have voted on Election Day. But as campaign operatives will tell you, once they bank those votes, it just reduces the universe of voters that they need to go contact and try to get out to the polls. So at least it makes it easier on the campaigns. And again, we'll look back and we'll say, oh, we should have known. But it is a very small percentage of the electorate, and certainly not anything that's definitive at this point, Christine.
All right, well, here we go. 2 weeks to go. John Allen and Monica Alba, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.